Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to talk about an amazing story about a church basketball team called the Mormon Yankees. The Mormon Yankees were an exhibition basketball team in Australia that played from 1937 to 1961, composed of young missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My father-in-law, Delmar Bjork, who is now 86 years old, served his mission in Australia from 1955 to 1957 and got to be a part of this team when the Mormon Yankees squad played exhibition games against international teams preparing for the 1956 Summer Olympics, which were held in Australia that year. He's going to share some of his memories of his experiences. But first, let me give you a little background information. Today, the idea of combining Christianity, missionary work, and basketball may sound a little strange, but actually in the beginning, they were tightly intertwined. The game of basketball was actually invented as a missionary tool. A man by the name of James Naismith invented the game of basketball as part of his job at the YMCA, or Young Men's Christian Association. It was his job to try to invite and entice young men into the Christian fold and shape them into responsible, God-fearing citizens. He succeeded by inventing a simple physical competition involving a soccer ball and 2 peach baskets affixed to opposing walls. The game was exciting enough to bring in boys off the streets of Springfield, Massachusetts during the cold days of December 1891, and the game of basketball was born. The YMCA invented the phrase muscular Christianity to describe the use of recreation for religious purposes. And by 1905, basketball in America was deeply embedded in churches, high schools, and colleges. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was among the many participants in this movement. Missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is sometimes nicknamed Mormons, began using basketball as a missionary tool in Australia in 1937. The term Mormon Yankees comes from the fact that these young missionaries were mainly visiting from the United States. So they were Mormons and they were Yankees. And they became an immediate phenomenon in Australia. In 1938, they won the Melbourne YMCA Championships and remained undefeated throughout the season. In 1939, they again won the Melbourne YMCA Championship and also became the champions of the state of Victoria. Their fame began to spread throughout the Melbourne newspapers, who gave credit to these Mormon visitors for stimulating public interest in basketball and for improving Australian standards of play. The missionaries organized clinics and played with Australia's very best in order to popularize the game. They credited the success of these Mormon teams with their clean mode of living and their health code, which is called the Word of Wisdom, which eliminates alcohol, tea, coffee, and tobacco from their diets. Then, when World War II happened, which affected people all around the world, missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were all sent home, and young men served as soldiers rather than missionaries. But the war eventually ended, and missionary work resumed. When the Harlem Globetrotters visited Australia in 1954, it piqued the interest of the Aussies, and mission president Charles Lindquist seized on that opportunity. He thought this was a perfect time to revitalize missionary work in Australia by reintroducing the Mormon Yankees. He assigned one of his missionaries, a college basketball star named Lawrence C. Dunn, to organize a team. Elder Dunn searched among the missionaries to find any basketball talent, and one of the missionaries he called was a young man named Delmar Bjork. Elder Bjork's missionary experience changed dramatically when he received a phone call one day from Elder Dunn. Del, will you share your stories about your amazing missionary experiences as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, serving in Australia in 1955 to 1957, where you had the opportunity to play basketball, competitive basketball. You were the Australian national champions, and also you got to play against the other Olympic teams. Can you share how that got started?
Well, we're talking about 2 different years apart there, but I'll try to explain. I've never done this before. But Delmar Bjork, or Del Bjork, ended up in Melbourne, Australia, where the headquarter offices of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints missionary headquarters was, in the town of Melbourne. Having met first with President David O. McKay and learned a great deal, and after talking with me a short time, he suggested that I would be sent somewhere on the east coast of Australia, and it turned out that I was sent to a place called Wollongong. Wollongong is 52 miles south of Sydney, Australia, and I had been there approximately 2 months when I got a strange phone call. The young man on the phone was Elder Dunn. A 6'10" man, was an accomplished basketball player from Brigham Young University. He was known for his high scoring capacity while playing within the Western Athletic Conference. I had seen him play in several basketball games, and when I heard this name of Dunn and that he was a basketball player from BYU, I was certainly impressed with his skills when I had a chance to watch games. But I had never personally talked to him. Yet, here on the other side of the world, he actually wanted to talk to me. And when he began to converse with me, he especially wanted to talk to me about basketball. Elder Bjork, how much basketball have you participated in? Was his first words on the phone to me. Have you ever played high school or university ball? My answer was no, but I really love the game and have felt that I could play competitively if I would have had the opportunity. But I had played lots of pickup games in high school and intramural college games. I said I had also played LDS church ball as well, and often played at the Deseret Gym. Well, the conversation continued for about a half an hour, and Elder Dunn finished by asking detailed subject questions about my knowledge of the game and what I might have done in certain situations, etc. I really enjoyed his verbal intuition study, and I guessed he at least wanted to take a look at me. 2 days later, a short postal letter was sent to my senior companion, who was an Australian, and his name was Elder Halsworth, asking how soon could we get to Sydney to be observed as a potential for the Mormon Yankee basketball team. 2 days later, I was pleased to personally meet Elder Dunn for the very first time. I learned some of the offensive plays and defensive patterns. We had a good time together, and somehow our coach, player Lauren Dunn, told supervising elder Earl McBride that Elder Bjork of Salt Lake City should come and become a member of the Mormon Yankee team.
Congratulations, you made the team.
It was just wonderful to play with the energetic Mormon Yankees in Sydney, Australia, especially so when we were participating in the Australian National Basketball Tournament.
This is so unusual to have a church team be playing as missionaries and to be playing at this national level. But back in 1955, basketball was very, very new to the country of Australia. And this team played a pivotal role in helping to get basketball started and helping it become popular and helping it become something that was new and exciting. And you talked about how you went to different places and you did camps where you would teach people how to play basketball, and you would do drills for them and show some things, and then you would talk about health and word of wisdom and used it as a teaching opportunity and how to get to know people. And then when did the Olympics take place, and when did the Australian national champions? You said those were 2 different years.
Well, the one we first talk about here is the Australian Open, is what we would call it if it was in the United States. Instead, it would be the U.S. Open. This opportunity came to the church, and it was suggested that we were allowed to play church ball. As a church organization. It had begun way back in about the 1940s. And from time to time it would exist, and then maybe a new, different missionary president would turn it away. However, I had a very good, wonderful cousin that was in Australia about 1947, and anyway, he became president of Utah Power and Light for many years, and he was one of the ones that suggested that missionary work was being helped by just having people made available, and little by little, one by one, a new team would be organized. And so in 1955, when I happened to be there, how they found my name and stayed with me, I know not, but I learned really quickly the BYU way of playing basketball, and it worked into my natural capacity as an athlete. I played football for the University of Utah.
Okay.
Just a short time. My specialty was a punter, and I could kick the ball quite high, and not necessarily the furthest, but I could kick where I aimed it, and it would work.
You were always a very gifted athlete.
I was a gifted athlete, but
it came natural. So basketball, you picked that up, no problem.
Yeah. Well, that's true, but
you got to be part of this team, and the team. So 1955. Now you're part of it, and what did that look like? How often did you play games? How did that affect your missionary work? Were you still able to go talk to people and teach?
Yes. Missionary work was not let out. As a matter of fact, the 52 miles from Wollongong south of Sydney to Sydney was ridden on a bicycle. That used to be kind of a interesting game, because we were on the east coast of Australia, and something that you'll maybe wonder about, why did we go by a bicycle? And the reason was we were asked at that time to try to live on $60 a month. That was what we were suggested that our parents send us, $60 a month, and we would try to be able to live on that.
So you couldn't afford a bus ride or whatever.
And so what we would do is get our bicycles. Now, I did get a good speed bike when I bought it, and that bicycle, we could go pretty fast down hills, and we could pump up hills faster than most because they were racing bikes. However, one of the fun times that we had, we would go downhill, pick up speed, see a bus in front of us, and drive up and hook on to the tail side, and we would ride uphill, and then we would ride downhill. Once in a while, a driver would stop the bus and tell us to get off, and when we would tell him what we were going to Sydney for, they'd say, "Okay, I'll let you hang on, and we'll take you to Sydney." And it happened. And so for strength and energy, to build muscles, to play the games, bicycle riding was done quite often between my companions and not. My companions didn't know how to play basketball, but
so some made the team and some didn't make the team.
So I was fortunate to get to here.
Yeah. Tell me about the Australian Open. How did you get involved in that? Did Australia invite you to be part of that?
Well, the Australians previously, even during the time of my cousin, as I mentioned, Frank Davis, they were trying to learn basketball at that time. And Australia's specialties are tennis and golf. And so that was something the Australians could also enjoy.
But basketball was new to them.
Yeah, but at this time, when I began playing in Australia, it was a lot of fun.
Australia. So when you started, was that right when that national championship? Was that your first games?
Those were not the first games. We had to play several games, but during that time, I proved my capability, and I was very fortunate. I'd been raised on the avenues in Salt Lake City, and if I wasn't going downhill, I was going up steep hills, and I climbed all over the mountains above my home, and climbed many mountains. I'd even been a deer hunter at times, but as a boy, mountains to me were very good, but it made it possible that for a little 5'8.5" boy, I could touch the bottom of the rim, and that meant I could jump pretty high, and there were times I would get knocked down, but for some reason the good Lord never let me get a bump that bothered me. And when we would finish a game, we would be sought by during the game too, by the press. The press of 2 to 3 different newspapers, and they would come and visit us, and we would usually go to a certain cafe and get soft drinks, and they would come over and talk with us, and because the press wanted people to also be active in the game of basketball. On another occasion, when the World Olympics for the year 1956, and
so as I remember what you've talked about, as the basketball teams all from around the world, they came to Australia, and they were trying to prepare for the game, but the rules were that they were not allowed to play the other Olympic teams in practice. and they wanted to be able to practice, and they didn't know, is there anybody around here who can play basketball? And someone recommended and said, well, yeah, there's this team. They're called the Mormon Yankees. You want to practice with them? So then you got a phone call, and tell us about some of those practice games.
That's correct. The Olympics were brought to Australia, and all of the Olympics were to be played in Melbourne, Australia. Previously, I had been a supervising elder, and I was at that time
you said about 800 miles away.
And I was about 790 miles away from Melbourne. It was more than that, probably 800 miles, because I was up higher. But anyway, all of a sudden I got a call from the mission home to transfer to Melbourne from the location of Waiala. And when I got there, I had a new assignment. You're going to be on a team now where you'll be able to play basketball, because as Linda was explaining, there were missionaries called to go to work in helping the Olympic teams
to practice.
Olympic teams had sent people to Australia about 2 months before the games, the theory to be that the Olympic teams would all be able to play each other prior to playing in the Olympic Games. The answer was from the Olympic Committee, you cannot play until you're ready to play the day you're called to play in the Olympics.
Right.
But what are we going to do? We're going to be here for a month and a half to 2 months trying to get some games, and you won't even let us play. The answer came back, well, so your only choice will be to find somebody like the Mormon Yankees. They have a 9 and 10 man team, 9 to 10 man team. So that's the only team we know of available. When that happened, all of a sudden, we had a lot more ball players.
So then they gave you a call, and so which countries did you get to play?
Well, we played about 28 different teams. And
28 different teams. That's a lot of basketball.
Well, yeah, we did. And we played usually about 4 games a week, and we offered every team in the Olympics to play each team 2 times so that they would
get some practice.
And that was the way we tried to play.
And they all took you up on it except the United States, didn't they?
Oh, the United States
they
didn't
refused
need
to play you. And they won the gold, so they didn't need it to practice. But you had a couple of super funny stories about when you played the French team and then when you played the team from the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Well, there would be as many as 5,000 people watching a game.
Wow.
And most of it was curiosity with some, and it was very important. The most difficult game, and this is my story, but that came was the Russians. The Russian team was a pretty good team, started to play us. I was a point guard when I was playing that game, and all of a sudden the fellow that I could intercept real quickly if a ball got away from or got around me. I could go faster than the Russians could run, and I could jump higher, even though I was smallest. And there were other point guards with us, but it happened to be when this one game with Russia began, and we started to get a real good lead on them. And all of a sudden, a substitute was brought in. The substitute, I didn't know, but it wasn't long before I was running down the court, and all of a sudden he was grabbing my shorts and trying to pull them down. I looked at him. I said, in my English, "Don't do that again or you'll be sorry." And he didn't know what I was saying. The next thing that happened, the people started to look from the audience, were looking at me rather funny, and all of a sudden, this same character tried to grab my shorts and pull them down. I gave him a judo chop that about broke his arm, and and I knew exactly where to hit him at the time, and I said, "Don't do that." Then they came back with another kid who I had not seen play, and all of a sudden the crowd was saying, "Get the minister, get the minister." They wanted to see the minister's behind. And I said, "Don't you do that." And all of a sudden, here came another hand, and I made sure that he got a little bit of advice too. And then the referees came over and said to me, "Don't do that anymore. You're going to break their arms." And I said, "That's right. And I'm not going to have them doing what they're doing and trying to encourage 5,000 people to say, 'Get the minister, get the minister.'"
Wow.
So that's how that ended.
So they were playing dirty.
But when it ended, we lost 2 times to the Russians, and we only lost them, I think, by 4 points one time and 8 points another, but they cheated, and they didn't only cheat on me, but they cheated on others, and it got to be kind of a joke that the ministers would be playing ball and everybody wanted them to get their shorts.
Oh, dear.
So that's the story about
And then with
Russians.
all the other teams, you beat all the other teams?
No, we didn't. We probably had at least 50% of them we would win. And for me, it was a thrill because here's a little guy that never even played college or high school, and all of a sudden I was playing, and I felt really comfortable. And our coach, wonderful fellow, Delisle H. Condi, became the coach of our team, and he was from Idaho.
And then he was the coach when you were playing against the Olympic teams?
Yes.
Okay.
And he wasn't the only coach we had.
But you always, the coaches were one of the players, one of the missionaries, one of the elders who
coaches were not only coaching us when we were playing in the Olympics, but they would help the Australians as well. The Australians like Delisle Condi, and they did a really good job. But I need to tell you, there was wonderful people that played that game.
I believe you. Well, another thing that's been so amazing about these teams is you have had mission reunions for 60 years. Mm-hmm. You have continued to have a friendship and to have connections with these other teammates, and it has lasted for decades.
Yeah.
And then over the last, I don't know if it's been the last decade or the last several years, this story has been forgotten. And then some people have kind of resurfaced it and brought it back to the memory. It's like, oh my gosh, this was such an incredible story. And they made a book about it, and they did a documentary about it, and then they did a feature film, a movie about it. And so it's kind of this beautiful golden nugget has been shined up and polished and shared a little bit again. So thank you for sharing your story. This is really an incredible experience. I'm so glad you got to be a part of that and let that be a part of you.
Thank you. for saying that. And I really don't understand why I was so blessed. I will also mention that I had my partners and my companions and I have baptized quite a few people. And we were able to do that as busy as we were. And I should say one thing here. When we were, I was not the group always touring, but there were times when Volkswagen Company in Australia provided one Volkswagen bus. It would carry 9 basketball players, and we were invited from town to town around the Australian territories, and basketball was taught in the hometowns of smaller communities to try to get people to learn the game of basketball.
The Mormon Yankees had a positive effect for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints over the next 2.5 decades. Several positive articles were published that dispelled myths about the church. During the peak of the Mormon Yankees' popularity, 1955 through 1960, the church in Australia tripled in size. The Yankees were influential among athletes as well, as examples in living a clean life and not smoking or drinking. I love the idea that we can use our talents, whatever they may be good examples and to help further God's work. In closing, I'd like to share a quote. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, it says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." Today, I invite you to let your light shine and let your good works glorify your Father in heaven. See you next time on Linda's Corner.